The European exploration into the estuary of the river Hooghly dates back to early 1500 AD. However, the official sanction came much later, when Emperor Akbar gave his assent to a Portuguese delegation who settled in a place called Hooghly. Hooghly was a gunj or a mart when the Portuguese started their trade and sold their cargo. The mart later developed into a city. 5 decades later, when the Portuguese reinforced themselves with lofty strong mansions armed with cannons, muskets and other armaments, they got involved into misconducts like piracies. Emperor Shah Jahan instructed his governor Qasim Khan to crush them, which he did on September 15, 1632, killing almost 10,000 Firangis in the battle. At about the same time, the East India Company, a British organization chartered by Queen Elizabeth I in 1600 AD, was making its first footprints on Bengal, quite stealthily. It was at the behest of Subedar Ibrahim Khan that Job Charnock agreed to start business at a marshy village called Shutanuti on 24th August 1690. After Charnock established Shutanuti, the eastern banks developed into a trade center where ships moored. Oceanic trade continued without properly constructed jetties until in October 1870, when Calcutta Port Commissioners was established. Much earlier, in around 1820, plans of construction of wet docks at Diamond Harbour and Kolkata were mooted. After a devastating cyclone in 1842 and siltation of the river, a new port was conceived at Matla River in 1860 by Lord Canning. He predicted an early death of Calcutta moorings due to siltation. Calcutta, however, became too important a center to be avoided. By 1871, over 140 vessels with net tonnage of 220,000 tons were being handled at the jetties. An impounded dock system was being conceived during this period to provide proper safety to the ships, immune from the whims of tidal flow and bores. In March 1884, the Secretary of the State confirmed Khidrpur as the site of the construction. By 1889-1890, the tidal basin was almost complete, and Dock 1 was on the verge of completion. Temporary railway tracks were established for easy removal of spoil and waste earth accumulated during the excavation of the site. Shore cranes with grab were used to load and remove spoils on barges. Soon, imports and exports started from Dock 1. The approach jetty, which is a long platform made of concrete and facing upstream at an angle to favor approach of incoming vessels on flood tide, also started coming up at around 1890. In 1892, Mr. W. Gories, a third-grade assistant harbour master, was appointed as the first dock master at Khidrpur docks. Under him, Mr. H. Edgar joined as the first berthing master of port commissioners, with a salary of Rs 250 per mensem. 4 years later, in 1896, another assistant BM joined on a salary of Rs 200 per month. The berthing master service was abolished between 1909 and 1920. The service reappeared in 1920. The increase in shipping necessitated the construction of another impounded dock in 1929, which was named King George's Dock. On the 23rd of February 1929, SS Navara entered berth number 4 as the first commercial vessel. Later on, King George's Dock was renamed Netaji Subhash Dock. Till January 1965, The berthing masters were assisting the assistant harbour masters in all the arrivals and departures in the port from the shore. Only when intra-dock shifting was required were they allowed to go on board. But when the AHMs went on a 55-day strike in January 1965, the berthing masters took the responsibility of all arrivals and departures, from lock to berth and back, by taking charge of the vessels independently. Till today, this monopoly of movements within the confines of the docks rests on the shoulders of the BMs, who pilot the ships and moor them alongside the concrete berth. When a ship approaches KP dock on flood, the harbour pilot anchors the vessel off the dock and turns her with the help of the tide as the ship's approach is opposite to the direction of the flow of the river at that time. Pinning the bow on the starboard anchor, the harbour pilot turns the ship with the help of the tide, wind, ship's rudder and main engine. Sometimes a tug is used to assist the turning. The 465 feet long and 30 feet wide approach jetty is laid out at an angle of 42 degrees east due north. This perfectly caters to a flood approach. However, ships sometimes are made to approach during ebb tide too. Once the ship is turned, the anchor is hove in the hose. Now it is time to make the approach. Slowly the ship is brought parallel to the approach jetty, so that a heaving line can be thrown ashore. The shore crew, who are directly under the assistant dock master or ADM, then haul up the heaving line, which brings with it a heavier polypropylene rope. The rope now becomes the main guiding tool apart from the engines. Similarly, the stern line is passed through another heaving line to the shore. Here, a berthing master acts as a slacking officer, who controls the stern of the ship from the shore. The journey into the confines of the lock is always a tricky affair, with very small margin of error. An ADM masters the art after spending years training his instincts, nerves and eyes. He knows that guiding a mammoth ship with huge momentum is like taming a wild elephant in a cage. A small deviation can be devastating. It may amount to serious damage to the ship or to the port. He, along with the berthing master at the rear end of the vessel, knows that if the taut rope parts, it may take away life or limb, as the recoil of the parted rope sweeps away literally anything in its path with tremendous force. The lives of a dozen men are in their hands. They are experts in timing. They know when to hold the line, how much to hold, and when to slack it, so that the lines don't part. Technically speaking, they warp the vessel with precise timing and judgment, in coordination with the shore crew, the ship's crew, and the harbour pilot. Risks to lives apart, an uncontrolled swinging force imparted on the vessel with the checking ropes may cause damage at the point of contact to the hull or to the concrete of the jetty. The sailing of a ship has been cancelled quite a few times due to these impacts. Simultaneous damage to port property is not uncommon either. Spring lines are sent from forward and aft as a second line of defense, in case the engines fail to arrest momentum. Once the ship is well secured inside the lock, the outer gate is ordered to be closed. The harbour pilot disembarks. He shakes hands with the next pilot, the berthing master. Symbolically, we can say that it is also a transfer of responsibility. The guard line is put right across the ship's path inside the lock beforehand to act as the third line of defense. Just in case, you never know. The nose of the 157.3 meter giant has to come dangerously close to the inner gate to fit in. Any contact with the leaves of the gate can be catastrophic. Let's have a peep at the other side of the working wall. Almost no room to play, literally. The beauty of the impounded dock is the much higher and constant level of dock water, which remains unaffected by the tidal rise and fall of the river. The gap has to be filled in now to open the inner gate. The ship sends the messenger or gant lines now to bring on board the dock lines. The dock lines will guide the ship through the basin. Sluice gates are opened to flood in dock water into the lock, to raise it to the same level as that of the basin. In fact, 2 messenger ropes are sent from the ship's forward deck to bring home the 2 dock lines, also lovingly called Chota Wala and Bada Wala from days of yore. There is another dock line ready to be picked up by the ship from her stern. This is called Lock Wala. This boat, called a gunboat, is quite handy. She brings the dock lines. These lines are picked up and secured on the ship. Previously, these lines used to be heavy manila ropes. With the advent of polypropylene, manila has been replaced. On the ground, a chain of actions are laid down by the ADM and his team of berthing masters. These are to take place like clockwork, starting with the Chota Wala, followed by Bada Wala, with the dock capstans turning to give the first pull. That sets the huge ship in motion. Before the advent of polypropylene dock ropes, these capstans used to turn big ships inside this very basin. That is why this 680 feet by 600 feet basin is also called turning basin.
Turning a big ship inside the KPD dock basin,
Yes, sir.
especially in the windy months and things like that. We had a number of ships lying at the number 13 berth, some lying at the head of the the 14 berth, and also near the dry dock caissoons.
Right.
Then near the other side, near the sort of small crafts all over the place.
Right.
And then the shipmaster, as a shipmaster, when there was a light ship, you could hardly make out that there was any clearance at all, and you are turning a huge big ship with just 2-3 ropes. It was quite an achievement, and credit must be given to the nerves of some of these youngsters that used to handle these ships.
Now, of course, turning is an absolute no-no, as the floating polypropylene line is an easy catch to be picked up by the ship's propeller.
Going dead slow, sir, now.
The narrow space and lack of room in these concrete limits probably justify all the elaborate exercises undertaken to streamline the journey of the ship to her final destination and make it as safe as possible. As the ship heads for the cutting, the pilot receives a command and replies. This process of command and feedback continues between the assistant dock master, the berthing master on the ship, and the berthing master at the cutting. The dock lines have almost served their purpose. Next, the shorelines and tugs will gradually take charge. First, the starboard side dock line, that is, the Bada Wala, is cast off. This is followed by the port dock line, that is the Chotawala. Now, the shorelines are the key guiding means into this narrow passage. And this ship is making one of the most fair weather journeys today, with gentle northerly breeze generating very little lateral drift. This would not be the scenario in any of those stormy seasons, when gusty winds try to blow away the ship like a balloon, literally. Then, all the counter forces are required to be applied to their limits to control the ship. And that is quite a nerve-shattering task. Nevertheless, this is an exhaustive exercise for all those who are running the show. As the bulbous bow of the ship closes in towards the island, measures are taken immediately. The island, along with the swing bridge, has to be in clear passage distance so that none of those underwater pipelines are damaged. Dropping anchor for any reason is prohibited inside the cutting. Probably the curious passengers are trying to figure out what is happening, and in the process trying to learn a few tricks of the trade as well. That ever-handy powerful gunboat is again deployed by the officers to make some room on the port side now. She is pushing the ship to her full strength. The berthing master from the ship stoops on the port side to have an estimate of clearance